Alchemy Energy, the podcast with Julie. Tonight, I have author and founder of the Global Transformational Project, William Douglas. Is that right? Transformation Project, excuse me.
Yep.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me, Julie. It's a real honor. I'm really glad to be here.
I'm kind of interested about your background before like, how did you get on this path to where you're at now?
Yeah.
Well, you've written all kinds of books, so I kind of want to get that kind of background, that catalyst that made you turn towards this type of work.
Yeah. Well, I was never a writer or anything. When I was in high school, I grew up in Western Kansas, worked in the oil field and out hauling bales of hay and all that stuff. And but my dad, he had post-traumatic stress disorder. He was in 3 years of frontline combat in World War II. He fought in Patton's army, General Patton, and his division was actually famous because they liberated the Dachau death camp. That was how he finished the war. And so, growing up in a PTSD household, it was just I didn't have a horrible childhood. I mean, my dad, I really have a lot of respect for how well he was able to hold it together after going through 3 years of frontline. If you saw the first 7 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, that beach invasion, he was in 4 beach invasions.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but PTSD, you can't control it. So, he would just have these like convulsions of, fury occasionally. But, I have a tremendous amount of respect and love for him because he handled it as well as he did. But anyway, and I didn't really, pay that much attention to it because I was growing up, late 60s, early 70s. And so, we were all just partying all the time anyway. And so, I was just self-medicating and, and that worked just fine up until in my 20s. Then I met my wife and we had kids. And then once you have kids, then you can't party all the time. And so then that's when I started realizing I needed to, find another way. And I ended up finding a therapist, and I was really lucky because the guy worked at the VA hospital with Vietnam veterans in the daytime, and then he took clients at night. And so I started counseling with him in the evening, and he recommended mind-body practices. So he recommended meditation or something, and so I ended up enrolling in a Tai Chi and meditation class, and it just blew my mind. The first night when I walked out of there, I just felt so connected to everything. It's like I didn't have that anxiety and that, that constant, spinning of the mind, that I'd had prior to that. And it was great. Now I did have struggles with it. We all do. Anybody who picks up meditation or mind-body practice, you have a lot of struggles with it. Your mind is dancing all over the place, and and it's all normal. So everybody out there who thinks, oh, I can't meditate, well, this is one time when I'll tell you you're wrong. Everybody can meditate. It's just a matter of just sticking with it, and holding it lightly. And being easy on yourself, not judging yourself for the process of it, because it is what it is. But the benefits of it are huge and massive. So anyway, I got into mind-body stuff really intensely. I was going to, like either a Tai Chi or a Qigong or a meditation or a yoga or a karate class or something almost every night of the week. And so I got into it real intensely, but then I drifted away from it. Just different things in life happened. But then what happened was I went through a really catastrophic life experience, and I had and after that I had an extraordinary consciousness experience. And over the years, as I've collected all this science for my book on consciousness and how our mind works and the power of the mind and possibilities of consciousness, so I had just kind of given up on this stuff. I'd gotten distracted with different things, but I had that catastrophic experience. And within a little more than a year, my mother passed away first. And then a few months later, my father passed away. And then a few months after that, my youngest son went into a coma, and he ended up passing away about a month later. And so I just, I just went into a tailspin, and I just crawled inside a bottle. I wasn't trying to meditate or anything like that. It just seemed like life was just out of control. And, but then, I had an epiphany, and I just decided, I wasn't going to go out this way. And so I just poured my booze down the drain and I put on my running shoes and I started running and I started meditating. I turned off the TV. I stopped taking the newspaper. I just went back to nature, went to the beach a lot to just sit there and just watch the waves roll in and feel all those emotions coming up. And anyway, one night before I went to bed, I got down on my knees and, which was really not something that I normally do. And I got down on my knees on the end of the bed and I just said, I need to know why we're here. I don't get it. I'm not getting, this whole life thing. And I need to know, what's the purpose? Why am I here? Why are we here? And anyway, at 3:00 in the morning that night, I suddenly, became conscious and I wasn't in bed. I have no idea how I got from my bed to the end of my bed, but I was sitting upright on the end of my bed. And this intelligence, this, I don't know how to describe it. It was just as real as, me and you looking at each other, but I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. And it communicated with me and it wasn't verbal. It was like right in the center of my consciousness. It was more powerful than verbal. It was more clear and concise. And anyway, it said, I'm about to show you what life could be like, what life could be like. And anyway, it touched me right in the center of my brain and this light expanded, through my consciousness. And then it touched me in the center of my heart and the same thing. And this light just became this expanding light. And pretty soon I was just seeing the ceiling of my bedroom just rushing at me. And then I saw the attic slats. And then I was looking down and I saw my house shrinking. I saw the California coastline shrinking. I saw the earth shrinking. And then I saw the moon off to my left. And I just had this experience where it was like I could feel everybody all at the same time. And I just knew that we were all going through exactly the same things. We all had the same fears, same doubts, same hopes, same love, same dreams. I mean, there's different flavors to humanity, but I mean, we're basically all going through the same thing. And I just had this just visceral connection to everybody and everything. And then I came out of it. And it was the middle of the night. And what happened was I slammed back down in my body. Everything just went into reverse and I slammed back down in my body after I had this expansive experience. And so I got up, my wife was snoozing, she was still asleep. And I walked out into the kitchen, thinking, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to go to sleep tonight. And anyway, that voice, it wasn't clear and powerful like it was before on the end of my bed, but it was, kind of a subtle little whisper. And I turned and I looked at the counter and there was a pen and paper on the counter. And that voice said, write. And so then I started writing. And it became like an obsession. It was like I spent all my time writing and this stack of things just got bigger and bigger. And basically there was about 3 components. I didn't design it. I was just flowing, whatever was coming to me. And I was writing poetry and I'd never written poetry before, but I had a bunch of poetry. And then I had a bunch of stories about just what people are going through, different people are going through, but they all have that kind of commonality of humanity in the story. And then the other thing that I had was a lot of stories about children's innocent wisdom and what it offers the planet at this time in history. And so anyway, so this writing went on for several months. I just spent almost every free moment that I had writing. And then I just decided, this is insane. I was a shipping clerk at the time. And, and I just thought, why am I wasting all my time writing? This is crazy. And I decided I was driving home on the 405 freeway in the LA traffic. And, and I just kind of I had enough. And I just thought, this is crazy. So what I was going to do is I was going to go home, change clothes, go to the local sports bar on the corner, and just drink myself into a stupor and forget about all this stupid writing stuff, just get it out of my head. And right before I walked out the door, the phone rang. And so, something said, okay, go ahead and answer it before you leave. And so I went and answered it before I went to the bar. And it was my sister from Kansas. And it was really weird because she'd never called the whole time that we lived in California. And I tried to chit chat with her and she wouldn't have any of it. She had something she had to tell me. And she said, Mom came to me in a dream last night. And so this was really weird because, her mom had just passed away, a year or so before. And I said, oh, okay. And she said she took me into a pure white room. And in the middle of this white room was a stack of white papers. And she started flipping through the papers and she said, look what Junior's been doing. And I'm like, my knees are like a little shaky, you know, and and so then, you know, the question in my head was, does she know what was on the papers? But there was part of me that didn't want to ask it because I thought it was a really cool thing that my mom had been watching what I'd been doing, because I was doubting all of it, you know, it all seemed crazy. And so I didn't want to ask the question, but I had to, because that's who I am. I have to know the answers. I'm a seeker. And so I asked her, I said, well, what was on the papers? And she goes, I don't know. She goes, there was so much stuff. And then she goes, wait a minute. She goes, I remember there was a lot of poems. There was a lot of poems. And so that really got my knees going again, because, you know, I'd never been a poet. I never wrote anything that a teacher didn't force me to write. And, and then she said, and there were stories about what people are going through in their lives. And so now my knees are, you know, really kind of starting to, you know, quiver. And then she said, there were stories about children's innocent wisdom and how important it is for the planet to, you know, to honor that. You know, and at that point I was like, I had to grab the bed. I could, you know, I would have fallen down. My knees just wouldn't hold me. And so I didn't go to the bar that night. I kept writing. And then, you know, I kept writing for 40 years. Now, I'm not saying that I'm, you know, have had an angelic life or anything like that. Life comes in waves, but I've learned, you know, this extraordinary consciousness experience and the mind body training, it really helps me surf those waves much better, so that I don't crash as deep when I crash, and, you know, and I fly higher when I fly higher.
Absolutely amazing. Do you feel that you were channeling that through your mother, or your mother was channeling that information to you?
Well, what I think it was I think I was just opening to, you know, kind of the vibration of the universe. And, you know, and I think we all have access. I think we all do that all the time. You know, we're all getting information from, you know, the fabric of the universe, if you will. And there's a great wisdom in it. You know, it's very beautiful and very compassionate. And the science that I've collected over 40 years that made this new second edition of the Gospel of Science, that's the science that shows this. And so it's a real beautiful, when we go into a meditative state, when we go into the alpha brainwave state, the alpha theta brainwave state, our brainwaves are vibrating around 8 hertz, or a little bit less than 8 hertz when we go into theta. And the vibratory rate of the universe, or the vibratory rate of planet Earth, is 8 hertz. So when we go into a meditative state, we're going into the same harmonic vibratory rate as the planet Earth. Now, when we do the Om sound, you know, when we, you know, the classic Om, like that, the Om sound vibrates at 432 hertz, and 432 hertz is the background frequency of the universe. So these mind body things, you know, we used to think of them as, you know, kind of these flighty, you know, Indian and Chinese things. Well, what we're realizing is those Indian and Chinese researchers were like extremely high scientists. They were studying things from within the consciousness rather than through a microscope or a particle accelerator camera or whatever. But they were studying the same, you know, cosmic energetic universe. And so the science that I've collected over 40 years is it's mind-boggling.
Okay, so this experience made you write, and so I kind of really want to get to your research on this consciousness, and how it supports, you know, this, you know, what I do, because I'm a medium, and, you know, I'm a channeler and that sort of thing, and putting the science behind that to some, they're just like, it's hogwash. We don't have the technology to measure it, and da 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 da. It doesn't exist, and da 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 da.
Well, there's behavioral science. There's actually a department. If you Google, I mention them in my book. I can't remember what university it's at, but they have a behavioral science department that actually looks at these kind of, you know, consciousness experiences. And so they might be interested in looking at it. But the physics behind this stuff is irrefutable. And what we know, one of the things that we know is that when we go into these alpha theta brainwave states on a regular basis, it has the ability, you know, according to the scientific research, to dramatically reduce somewhere between 60 and 90% of the health issues that we face, because they're caused by stress. That's what the science shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so these mind-body practices, they're ancient systems to heal us, to relax the body into a more effective natural state of healing. And it's really profound and powerful. So when I explain this to people, because I teach in hospitals and corporations and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but when I explain this to people, their assumption is, well, if this was real, I would be hearing about it on television all day long. But what I tell them is that, meditation teachers, mind body teachers, yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, we don't have multi-billion-dollar advertising budgets. What you hear about on television is from, companies that have multi-billion-dollar advertising budgets. So it's simply a matter of money. That's why you're not hearing about it, on your television screens. So, but I'm telling you, and I'm showing you the science, and you can look up the science yourself, because that's what I want people to do. Everything's meticulously endnoted in the back of the book. And so you have that. We know that we can dramatically reduce health costs. We can dramatically change our own health and, mental and emotional well-being. The mind-body practices, they have the same antidepressant benefits as pharmaceuticals do, except without any of the negative side effects and with a whole bunch of positive side effects. So we have that aspect of the science, but then we also know that that human consciousness can affect the physical world. And so there's studies that have been done with what they call the particle wave function. And what early quantum physicists pretty much all agreed on was that consciousness affects the behavior of subatomic particles. Now, when we're talking about subatomic particles, we're talking about reality, because everything in existence is made of subatomic particles. So if human consciousness is shown in a laboratory to have an impact on subatomic particles, then that means that we're influencing the physical world with our consciousness all the time. Now, maybe later we can get into more studies, into some of the studies on how we know that, but I'm just telling you, we do know that. Science knows that. Now, the other thing that we know is that human consciousness, when it goes into these coherent states, it more powerfully affects the consciousness of other people. And while I was writing these books, one of the things that we did was we started a world event. About 22 years ago, we started it, and now it's in 80 countries, and it's called World Tai Chi Day. And World Tai Chi Day is Tai Chi and Qigong groups, and also there's meditation and yoga groups that participate as well. And in 80 different countries all around the world, for a 24-hour period, there's a wave of mass Tai Chi and Qigong exhibitions and yoga and meditation presentations and participatory things. And it starts in New Zealand, and then it goes all the way around the planet, 10 a.m. local time, worldwide. And so it goes events all across Asia, all across Europe, North Africa, North and South America, and then it ends with the final event in Kauai, Hawaii. So we started that event 22 years ago. It got picked up by CNN when we first started organizing it. And then over the years, we've gotten media coverage of it that has reached a potential of over 1 billion potential viewers and TV watchers. But anyway, in 2007, I found out about something at Princeton University called the Global Consciousness Project. And what they found was that human consciousness would affect their computers in the laboratory. So they ended up creating these computers. They call them random event generators. And they ended up putting them all over the planet. And they wanted to see if there was some connection of global consciousness. And they found out there was. I think the first big event that they noted sent their computers off track was Princess Diana's funeral, because people all over the planet were, very saddened. She was very beloved for a lot of different reasons. And so they noticed their computers going way off track during her funeral. And then they noticed it during other times of, like global tragedy. But then at some point they decided to start studying deliberate consciousness events. And so in 2007, I had learned about what they were doing, and I contacted them and I said, we created this World Tai Chi Day. Could you guys look at your computers and see if you see anything? And they said, oh yeah, no problem. But they never got back to me. And so I was really disappointed. I just assumed that we didn't have an impact, And but then as I was doing the final edits on this new second edition of the Gospel of Science to come out on January 1st of this year, about 4 months ago, I decided to contact him again because since we started World Tai Chi Day, there's been other events that have sprung, kind of come after that. And like there's a United Nations International Day of Yoga and World Peace Meditation and different things like this. And so I contacted them again before my book went to press. Because I just wanted to see if they had any data that showed that consciousness, any kind of these consciousness events, these international consciousness events had an impact. And they got back to me right away this time, and they said, "Yeah, we've studied about 100 of these, and yes, they are having an effect on global consciousness." And right at the top of the list was World Tai Chi Day, the event that we'd started. And so that just blew my mind, because I was just some poor kid from Kansas. My father had an 8th grade education. I don't have a college degree. I'm just just like everybody else. I'm just a regular kid. I was probably grew up a lot poorer than most people, it just blew my mind, that we, followed a consciousness thread that just, and we didn't, and it wasn't like this was a big master plan. I never planned on writing books or organizing a world event or, any of this kind of stuff. It was just following that intuition. It's like it brings a stone up out of the water, and you can step on that stone, and then it feels like your life is just chaos. You don't know where it's going. You're doing things that don't really make sense sometimes. But if you're tuned in and you're following that thread, connecting with that core, that fabric of the universe, it'll bring these stones up that you can walk on. And then one will lead to another and one will lead to another. And sometimes you'll go down one path and you'll think, oh, that was a big waste of time. And then you'll go down another path and that'll take you somewhere. And then 5 years later or 10 years later, that old path that you went down all of a sudden makes sense. And, but it's just tuning into that nebulous and having faith. And all this, all this science validates all this stuff. All this stuff's very real. For example, one of the studies that I cite in the book is what they know now is that meditators have a higher incidence of synchronicities. So if we meditate regularly, we experience more synchronicities. And people that have, when we have synchronicities, we know sometimes they're life changers.
Oh yeah.
It could just be a little thing, that you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't slowed your brain down, with that alpha theta brainwave state.
Well, you can do it when you're conscious and not even if you're tuned in, you can pick up those vibes. I'm also a healer, and so I'm a sound healer, and I'm a Reiki master teacher, and from that I became a medical intuitive. So I do work with that correlation between that energy in the body, the mind, the emotions that are affecting the body. The health and the stress in the body is from emotional stress. So this is really right up my alley. So tell me more.
Well, now that since you touched on the stress issue, one thing that happened to me was, I had put all this science together in this book that just showed that when we practice mind-body practices, really it kind of makes us a bit of a superhuman. It increases our IQ, our gamma brainwave function. We become more creative. We find more elegant, simple solutions to things. And so I had been immersed in all this science. But then when the pandemic hit, just like a lot of Tai Chi teachers and yoga teachers and meditation teachers, the lockdowns and everything, they just they virtually destroyed our a lifetime of building, a teaching practice. Everything just boom, just shut down. And so I did what a lot of people did. I started spending my days in front of the television watching the fear and panic driven news. And it just rose to a peak crescendo, of just divisiveness and negativity and, name calling and also just that constant Armageddon. It's like every program leaves you with Armageddon and you have to tune in or else you're going to, be unwitting dupe of, whatever. And so anyway, I got to a point where it just fried me and I just walked away from all that. I did what I had done 40 years ago after my losing my parents and everything. I just turned off the news. I stopped reading news stories on the internet and I just started looking for more inspirational when I did look at media, it was, I used YouTube because there's just a lot of beautiful programming, like probably, your programming and these, I like, I did start watching some astrological, tarot programming because I found that it was very therapeutic. It's kind of like a Rorschach test. You lay the cards out and then you start looking, and some things resonate, some things don't, but it just kind of helps you walk through some of the things that you're going through in your life, But anyway, getting away from the fear-based media was such a huge thing for me. And then that's when I dove back into the second edition of this book. And then at that point, rereading all that science on mind body, it was like I just wanted to be, immersed in it. I wanted to be meditating. I wanted to be doing these things. I wanted to experience this growth that the science showed that it could lead to. And so go ahead.
Well, you ended up doing all this, collecting all this research in that time. Is that right? During the pandemic?
Yeah, I had, I've been collecting the science for 40 years. And because I was trying to understand the experiences that I was going through, and society, modern or popular culture, it really doesn't validate, consciousness experiences and, extraordinary consciousness experiences. And so I always encourage everybody, when you do have these insights, and it may be huge or it may be something that just kind of flits through your consciousness, but you'll get a kind of a thing that'll tell you that was important. And you want to journal, you want to write these things down. Because if I hadn't been writing these things down for all these years, I would have just forgot about all this stuff. It's like the books I never would have had 6 books. I never would have, organized a world event that changed global consciousness. And, and none of it seemed like it was world altering when I was having experiences. It was just that I knew it was important and I knew, I should write it down. And so I encourage everybody to do that, practice mind body practices, make space in your consciousness and start writing your experiences down, because you are just as important. What you have inside you that's seeking to come through it's just as important as anything. We've been taught, especially my generation, that the people that are on the shiny box in the living room, with the perfect teeth and the the $10,000 suits, we're taught that those people are smarter and important, and that's where all the answers are going to come from. Well, I think over the last couple of years, I think a lot of people have woken up to the fact that they're not that smart, and they don't have the answers. But the answers are there, and they're there within each one of us, and we're all here to express this. And so that's why the book led to the creation of the Global Transformation Project. And what we're advocating is for a United Nations resolution to recommend mind-body education become a core part of public education worldwide. Now, it wouldn't be mandatory. No country would have to do it, no school would have to do it, and no child would have to do it. When we do presentations in public schools, we always tell the schools, you need to have an alternative to what we're going to do, like a study hall. Because before we start the meditation, I'm going to tell the students that you don't have to do this. You can go do a study hall if you want to, because it's so important for mind body practice that the person that's doing it has decided to do it, that it's their decision to do it. And so that's how we're advocating it, but we want to use the United Nations to educate educators all over the planet about just how powerfully mind-body education incorporated in public education would lift education to a whole other level. And so what we do is we provide the science, and there's plenty of science out there. It shows that mind-body practices increase IQ. So our IQ actually increases when we practice these things. And our math proficiency skills improve, our GRE reading scores improve, our verbal fluency improves. And, and then of course you have all the health benefits as well. And then also it increases the empathy and compassion parts of the brain. And so what you see is you see less bullying. You just see kids, taking on a whole different, more compassionate way of going through their lives.
So this is different than PE. So why is this so much more impactful than, traditional physical education in our
Yeah.
in the US anyways.
Yeah. I get into all this science is endnoted in the second edition of the Gospel of Science. But what you find when you look at the science again and again is that a mind-body exercise like yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong is more effective. Now these things give you cardiovascular benefits. So they'll give you the same cardiovascular benefit as, more impactful exercise. So you're getting your cardiovascular benefit from Tai Chi or yoga. But what you don't get from PE is you don't get that mind-body effect. And that mind-body effect, again and again, when you look at the research, that mind-body combination has a much more powerful healing influence on the body. And so what we're suggesting is that this would replace PE. It would be a mind-body course would be kind of a combination of health science and physical education. And so the physical ed would come from Tai Chi, Qigong, and yoga. But what we advocate is the big five, because they're the ones that have all the massive science behind them. And so they're proven to have really, really powerful benefits for the education process. And that is meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, and mindfulness training. And so those five are what we're advocating. And so it would be like a 1 hour a day program that would replace PE. It would be much more effective on a lot of different levels. And it would actually transform the planet. Because what would happen is when we do this, we'll have hundreds of millions of public school students being trained in mind body practice. And so we're talking about the world spends over $8 trillion every year on healthcare, and that's just getting worse and worse. And so what the data shows is that we could reduce the common illnesses that people are dealing with if we train the planet in mind body practices by somewhere between 60 and 90%. So we're talking about trillions of dollars saved every year, year after year, just on health costs. But what we also find is that prisons that use mind body practices, they have much lower violent incident rates, and also they have much less return to prison rates. So so we're talking about a reduction in police costs, court costs, prison costs, and ultimately war. Because if we're expanding the empathy and compassion parts of the brain of hundreds of millions of public school students all over the planet, ultimately we're talking about less and less war. Now, in my book, I have data. There's just science in this book that will change the way that everybody sees everything in their lives. I mean, it will change everything. And one of the things that I have in the book is I have a chart from FBI statistics, and it shows that over the last 40 years, violent crime rates have been dropping precipitously. Now, when I say that in public presentations, people go, that can't be true. I just saw in the news, violent crime's going through the roof. Well, that's because the news is panic driven. I get into all this in the book. The news, what they realize is that when they upset us or frighten us or anger us, it reduces stress chemicals, and we get addicted to the stress chemicals. And so we keep coming back to the news to get that stress chemical charge. And so I get into all that. But the thing is actually, even though the news, if there's a little tiny increase in violent crime, what the news will make you think is that it's worse than it's ever been in human history. But it's not. It's at a 40-year low. Maybe it went up a little bit that day or that month or that week, but it's still way lower than it used to be. But they never tell people that. And so this is a very important thing, because what the science shows is the biggest indicator of our future health is whether we have a hopeful, positive vision of the future. And the media is painting a very dismal, hopeless image of the future. And it's just not based on reality, and it's not based on science. Because when you look at this science, there's a fabric of compassion that permeates the entire universe. There's an unpublished study that I mentioned in my book. Adam Curry was at the Princeton Engineering and Anomalies Research Lab, and he talked about an unpublished study in a really interesting documentary called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And what he said was in this unpublished study, they had a grow light that was a random event generator light in the center of the room. So, it's a square room. So what it should have shown in the four corners 25% of the time. That's what the random event generator's statistical probability. So 25% in four corners. But what they did was they brought a living plant into that room, and they put that living plant in one of the corners of the room. And what they discovered was that the light shined much more often over in the corner of the room where the plant was. And so I don't know how else to say this. It seems like the universe has a compassion within it, and it actually knew that there was a need for that light in that one corner of the room from that plant, and then it sent the light over that direction more often. This is very hopeful. This science is very hopeful. And then the Princeton Engineering Global Consciousness Project, I ended up talking to a lot of these physicists as I was writing the book. They were explaining it to me because I wanted to make sure I didn't get it, that I got it right. And so I spent some time communicating with Roger Nelson, who was the director of the Princeton's Global Consciousness Project. And he said that the most exciting thing that he found in that 20 years of research was that what they discovered was that when they were studying, these effects on global consciousness, whether it was a tragedy or whether it was a mind body or a healing event, and what they found was that when people were involved in what they called compassion and harmony, compassion, healing, and harmony type of mass consciousness events around the planet, their consciousness was more powerful than when the world was going through tragedy and fear. And so that bodes well for the future, because it shows that we're the most powerful when we're having healing, compassionate states of being. And so when we go into those states, it doesn't just heal us, but it actually has a healing effect that ripples out throughout the whole planet.
Yeah. Totally. I totally believe that. Awesome. I can't wait till our conversation after this. Because this is going to be off the record. I did want to talk about, this is fascinating, and I got to get this book. It's going to take me a couple months to read. And digest it.
Well, I had always hoped that people would just, they'd bring it to bed and then just read like about 5 pages or 10 pages a night. And because you'll find in each one of those like 5 or 10 pages, it's going to be like the equivalent of like a whole new way of seeing things on so many different levels. Yeah, so it's like you can't really digest it all at once. You have to.
I perceive all of this as energy myself. So everything's energy to me.
Yeah.
So just consciousness, energy, you can just translate it the same thing to me.
Yep. And that's what science says. Yeah. We're, just like, for example, our bodies, we're mostly empty space. If you could, there was a physicist, I went to the Institute of Noetic Sciences conference, and there was a physicist there, and that was her career, but she taught meditation, just out of a personal desire. She enjoyed the benefits of it and wanted to share it. But anyway, she was given a talk, and she said, when we go into these meditative states, after we come out of it, we feel lighter, we feel more open, and we tell ourselves that's a hypnotic delusion. But she said, actually, that's when you're feeling the most real. And she said, we're the subatomic particles that make us up are just a tiny percentage. Most of what we are is empty space or potential energy field. And she said, if you could somehow get rid of all that empty space that we're made of and smush all those subatomic particles together, the whole human race, the entirety of humanity, would only add up to the size of one grape. So that's how spacious we are. So that's how I always open my meditation classes. I tell people that, and I say, okay, now it almost feels like the wind could blow right through you, and that's the state, that's the consciousness that we want for the meditation experience.
Fantastic. Wow. I think I have to take on some new practices here.
Well, I have in the back of the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, I have like a potpourri. So I introduce people to, just like maybe a dozen different kind of meditative approaches, Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness, and, different ones, mantra meditations, breathing meditations, different things like that. And just so that people can just kind of sample things. But then I encourage people, also find like local groups and local classes, so that you have that social network as well. Because there's something about group energy. It's really powerful.
So I have to ask, because you just said group energy. So do you feel yourself vibrating when you leave that, like on a high?
Like after a mind-body experience?
Yeah.
Well, what I feel like is I feel really at home on the planet. You know what I mean? Because when when I get, the normal kind of irritation that we get, from different things in our lives, that's when I start feeling like I'm kind of separate from everything. I feel isolated, and they can also, when you practice mind body practices, they can see the brain change, so the part of the brain that makes you feel more connected starts to get more active and larger. And so you actually have that neuroplasticity where you're actually changing your brain. And so, you get to where when you're practicing these things, like you were saying, you can kind of just have these experiences, as you're going through your life, not just when you're doing these things. And in fact, a lot of times they happen when you're not doing these things. But when we're doing these things, it kind of gives us that background, vibration, so that we can have that. But yeah, when I teach a class, it took me years to get to this point, because when I first started teaching, you always feel like you're supposed to be the teacher and you're supposed to keep everything in order and all that kind of stuff. That's how we're raised. But if you teach long enough, I think that you get to the point where what you do is you just walk into the class and you're just having a meditation just like everybody in the class, because you get so used to doing it. And so when I go in, I'm actually talking to myself through the same meditation that I'm talking to everybody else through. And so when I walk out, yeah, I feel great. I just feel real connected and real centered, and the world just looks like it's more pregnant with potential. You know what I mean? And that's what this whole book is. This whole new second edition of the Gospel of Science. What it shows you is this is an Armageddon, folks. This is not the end of the world, as much as all the media wants to sell it to you. We are on the cusp of some extraordinarily beautiful changes on this planet. And people are sensing it on a lot of different levels. But, like Gil Scott-Heron said, the revolution is not going to be televised. You're not going to hear about it on the news.
I kind of see that maybe it's going to be televised. Things will change more than anything. They'll change. They may not be reported, but you'll see an evident change along the way.
That could happen. And then also, the media could evolve. What'll make media evolve the fastest is if we just decide that, our time is more valuable than to be spent on worthless, meaningless, divisive, fear-based, entertainment, because that's really what most of the news is entertainment. And so when we turn away from it, the media will chase us. There will come a time when they'll be trying to find out what it is that we're looking for, and then offer that to us instead of the old paradigm, because the old paradigm is not working. It's just it makes people fearful. Like, because I teach in hospital classes, and so most of the people in my classes, they're dealing with serious health issues, and so stress is it contributes a lot to their state of health. And I was really disturbed, as we were going through the pandemic, because they had a distorted picture of reality. I saw a poll, and they asked people if they were regular TV news watchers, and so many of my students are, that are from the hospital, they watch a lot of TV because they're at home a lot, and they watch a lot of news, a lot of them. And anyway, they asked people, and so out of the people that watch the news regularly, they asked them what they thought the hospitalization rate for COVID was. And they thought it was 50%, but it was only 1%. Now, I'm not saying that was 1%, that's not a great thing, but to have the stress in your mind to think that, that adds a lot of stress to these people's lives. And so I was constantly trying to, shed some light on this fear-based distortion that they were getting from the media. And it was a weird experience, because a lot of people would get mad at me when I would tell them that, because
telling them the truth.
Yeah, but they had formed such an intimate relationship with these media pundits that, when I suggested these media pundits had given them a distorted vision, they acted like I was insulting their wife or their husband or their best friend. You know what I mean? And I wasn't even insulting them. I was just pointing out a fact. But I wasn't prepared for that. That was kind of weird.
You know who started all this 24-hour news stuff, right?
I think it was Ted Turner, wasn't it?
You're right.
Yeah, but I have to say, from my experience, I think CNN was a lot better when Ted Turner was there. I think when AOL Time Warner took it over, I think it really went to hell in a handbasket. You know, I think he did have a vision, you know, for like an international news program, you know, and so you know, it's like I kind of liked what he was trying to do, but it didn't turn out that way. Yeah.
Well, there was something else behind it, and I can't remember. He wanted to show something, and whoever he was broadcasting through or trying to broadcast through, they said, well, you have to have news on. So that's when he's like, okay, well, I'll do 24-hour news then.
Oh, okay.
So he could do his thing.
Oh, okay. So that's how it started.
Yeah, that's how it got started.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he found a way around it, a loophole.
Oh, okay.
Not to get off topic.
Yeah. It's in the ballpark.
So, you know, kind of interested to hear about, before we go, this is your nonfiction writing, but you've written a couple fiction books.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, I actually, one of them got Best Fiction of the Year award from Spiritual Enlightenment magazine. Yeah, it's called 2012: The Awakening, and Deepak Chopra called it a gift. And yeah, that was really nice. And but anyway, yeah. So my fiction. So I have 2 novels. I was actually I've been contemplating a third one for years, but they're both completely different stories, different characters, different stories. But the underlying theme of all my books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is it's how when we come to terms with our consciousness, we can tune into why we're here on this planet. And so in my 2 novels, that leads people into these really intense adventures. And, you know, just like in real life, it's not all pretty. When you're following your calling, you know, I mean, there's times when you'll be tested, you know, and you know, you just have to have a pure heart, you know, and just, you know, compassion is the reason we're here, you know, and you follow that thread, you know, you want to follow things that are going to be good for everybody. And so that's the thing that all my works, including the 2 novels, have in common, is people getting in touch with that deeper sense of self. But you know, it's nail biting fiction. I mean, people who aren't really into spiritual things, they would find it very exciting. You know, you don't have to be a, you know, consciousness seeker to enjoy it. It's because I like adventure, and so I all of that's in there. Yeah.
So how did Deepak Chopra get a copy of your book?
Well, he got it through a mutual friend of ours in San Francisco, and I was really happy to get a blurb from him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I read that earlier today, and I meant to mention that. Could you tell us just a little bit about that storyline?
Now, okay, one's 2012: The Awakening. The other one's A Conspiracy of Spirits. So which one would you rather hear about?
You know, I want to hear about The Awakening, but A Conspiracy of Spirits sounds really intriguing to me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Conspiracy of Spirits. There's 3 main characters. There's a little Mexican girl. Her parents are undocumented immigrants, and she lives in Russell, Kansas. And then there's an old Chinese woman who lives in Russell, Kansas. And then there's a young corporate climber in Southern California. And the 3 of these people start having these like visions and things that happen to them that keep pushing them towards the Arctic. And the book opens with a scientist who's at the Arctic, and she's testing the methane levels that are emerging from the ocean floor, because as the planet warms, it starts to release more methane, and methane is a very severe greenhouse gas. And so the fear is that as the frozen oceans warm in the Arctic, it'll release all that methane, and that could be a big problem. And so at the same time that these people are starting to have these visions about the Arctic, And eventually this draws the three of them together. The Mexican girl, the old Chinese woman, and the corporate guy from Southern California. But while this is going on, there are two engineers that are working at a massive corporation called the North American Motor Corporation. And the corporation was forced to throw some money at a non-polluting car because of legislation that passed. And they didn't really want to do it, but they had to do it legally. And so they just brought in some young engineers that they didn't think would be able to really do anything. But as it turns out, it was like the dream team of young engineers. And they ended up creating a solar collecting vehicle that just so blew normal solar collection processes out of the water that it would literally change the entire planet overnight. It would just make energy free worldwide, basically, is what this breakthrough would cause. And it was kind of a quantum approach to solar collection and processing. And so these two engineers, they ended up getting murdered at the very beginning of the book. And so then these other three people that I just introduced you to, the young Mexican girl, the old Chinese woman, and this corporate guy from Southern California, their lives keep pushing them together. They don't know each other, but as you go through the book, you start to see how their lives come together, and then they realize why they're here, and they realize what they have to do. And and there's just massive economic and political forces that don't want them to bring this information to light. And so it's a real nail-biting thriller. I mean, it'll. I had readers. One reader wrote a review. And when she was reading one section of the book, she screamed out loud, and then her kids ran in the kitchen and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And it was because the characters were, they were going through a really, really intense moment.
Oh, wow. Man, how do you get your whole collection sent? Autographed and sent to me.
Well, if you go to, anybody can go to smarttaichi.com, and then they'll see an author's page that I have there, and that has all my books, links to all my books. Yeah, okay. Smarttaichi.com.
I got to put that on here. Smart.
TAICHI. Smarttaichi.com.
Let me see if I spelled it right. Is that right?
Yeah, that should get you there. Yeah, you can try it.
All right.
But definitely with one T will get you there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think two T's will get you there too, but one T will definitely get you there.
Oop. Okay. My computer's lagging here. Oop. Okay. Oh, I thought I lost you. I can't go over there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just everybody. It's just like that, except one T.
Okay. You also have another book here. We didn't even the Tao of Tai Chi.
Yeah. The Tao of Tai Chi, the making of a new science. Yeah. What the approach that the way that I was brought up in Tai Chi, it takes a lot of different forms. There's Tai Chi teachers that just kind of teach Tai Chi movements like an aerobic exercise. But then there's a lot of other different ways that people teach Tai Chi. And so for me, it's always been, I was always taught that it was like a meditative experience. And so it combines sitting meditation and moving meditation and the Tai Chi and the breathing and everything. And I started to see that Tai Chi was like a microcosmic laboratory for how we live our lives. And so it's like, just for example, when we're learning how to meditate, when we first start meditating, we might have really great meditative experiences, but then there will be other days or times when our brain is just all over the place. And, and we don't feel like we're meditating. And we'll start to beat ourselves up for it. We'll think, oh God, I'm a horrible meditator. I don't even deserve to meditate. And, you get that stuff going on in your brain. And then what happens is, you reach an epiphany and you realize, well, I'm either going to have to lighten up on myself, and just kind of have some fun with this, or I'm going to have to quit meditating, one or the other. And I didn't want to quit meditating because I knew I felt better when I did it. And the science showed, why, it was doing all kinds of amazing things. And so, you just get to the point where you don't even judge yourself when your mind wanders. You just notice, oh, okay, yeah, I was thinking about that. So now I'm coming back to the meditation, and I'm not beating myself up. I'm not wasting any time with that. And I'm just coming back to the meditation. And so you just get to where you're just really compassionate with yourself, and you don't beat yourself up for the normal processes of the mind. And then what happens is that actually changes your brain. I mean, physically changes your brain structure and the function. And so then you get to where you don't beat yourself up as much when you're out in the world either. You catch yourself when you're doing that. And then you think, yeah, you're just a human, Bill. Come on.
Right now.
Yeah.
You let somebody else off the hook, but you won't let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
And the more that you do that, because I'm kind of like in that practice of like, hey, stop beating yourself up. Hey,
right.
It's all right. You got time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Well, and the other thing that I noticed, as I went down the mind body path, and and you get to where you just kind of observe things, because your mind's not spinning all the time. And so then you can kind of notice things and see things, that a lot of people miss. And one of the things I realized was that, those people that are like really urgent and really, upset about every little thing that goes wrong, and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's how they treat themselves. That's why they treat other people that way, because that's how they treat themselves. And so then I realized, if I can practice lightening up on myself, and just being okay, with who I am, it's like, we're all trying to do the best we can, and it takes whatever form it's taken. But the more that we can just get off our backs and stop driving ourselves and beating ourselves up, then the better this process goes. And then what happens is, we don't feel like being mean to that person handing us our coffee at McDonald's because they didn't have the coffee ready or whatever. We realize they're just a human being going through the stuff, and they're probably going through worse stuff than we are, because I don't think McDonald's pays that much. You know what I mean? Right. And so it's like, you just get to where Alan Watts, he had several extraordinary consciousness experiences, and he was really integral to me in the very beginning of understanding meditation and Eastern practices, Alan Watts. But anyway, later on in life, when I was writing this last book, I found out that he had several extraordinary consciousness experiences, because I was writing about my own in the book. And he said that when you come back from these experiences, he said that one thing that's very common is that you tend to see the divine in everybody's eyes. In everybody's eyes. And I feel that way too. I think when we practice these mind body practices, and perhaps even have extraordinary consciousness experiences, which I think you do, when you're meditating, a form of extraordinary consciousness experience, it's like you just start to notice, when you look in people's eyes, it's like you see that fragile human being, and you realize, yeah, they're dealing with stuff, just like I'm dealing with stuff, and they're being nice to me. So isn't that cool, that they're going through all that crap in their lives and they're still being nice to me?
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. I really do. I have something to talk to you about afterwards, but I've got this pressing question. Mm-hmm. Who is this behind you on the wall?
Oh, that's John Lennon.
Okay.
Yeah. When we went. The Australians flew us to Australia for World Tai Chi Day one year. Occasionally, we'll get World Tai Chi Day organizers, and they'll fly us to their country, to say a few words about World Tai Chi Day. And so anyway, the lady there, Barbie Coates, is she's the artist, and she was an assistant Tai Chi teacher for Bev Abaya in Australia. She has a program called Tai Chi at the Beach. So all of her classes are at the beach. It's awesome. But anyway, Barbie Coates, the artist, she grew up in Liverpool, and she went to high school with the Beatles. And so she had done this sketch of John Lennon, and so she gave me a print of it, and that was really nice. Very
cool.
Yeah, the Beatles. At the very end, I closed my book with mentioning the Beatles because. I grew up, during the whole Beatlemania. I was a young kid when the Beatles, the Ed Sullivan Show. That's when they splashed across America, and I remember it all. I mean, I was really young, but I remember it all. And I remember when the Beatles went to India to learn meditation from the Maharishi. And you know, and that really had a big impact on me. I was really young at the time. It wasn't like I learned how to meditate immediately because of that. I was just a kid. But I do think that when I did get to a little bit older and I did start to look into meditation, I think the Beatles being in the back of my mind, you know, with the Maharishi, I think that really, you know, kind of encouraged me to do it more. And I think they did that for hundreds of millions of people around the planet. So I really credit the Beatles because the Beatles had a place in people's consciousness and hearts that nobody had ever had before in the history of humanity. You know, there'd never been a cultural phenomenon, you know, in our modern times. Well, you know, even the prophets that started the religions, they didn't have that kind of following when they were alive. You know, it was long after they were dead that people started following them. So the Beatles, they really, you know, it's like they had a really special place. And in the book I mentioned, I can't remember how many hundreds of times they used the word love in their songs. And, you know, they just unashamedly sang about love, you know, and compassion and connection. And I think the reason that they had the courage to do that was because the world gave them so much love. You know, it's like my wife was from Hong Kong and they loved the Beatles in Hong Kong, you know, and I was from Kansas and they loved the Beatles in Kansas. And so it was like the world loved the Beatles. And then the Beatles turned around and shared that love through their music. And I think that, you know, with when they went to India to study with Maharishi, I think they played a huge role in this transformation. And when the Global Transformation Project gets this stuff into public education all over the planet, the Beatles will be as much responsible for that as all of us going to globaltransformationproject.org and signing the petition and then sharing it with other people.
Thank you for plugging that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have a you know, question about how it might be implemented. Excuse me, that program being implemented in the States, and
Yeah.
how people might push to have that done in the States rather than on a global scale.
Yeah, well, what we want to do, well, let me say right now that mind-body practices are in public schools all over the country. And the schools that did it are reaping the benefits. I mean, you know, the bullying rates go down, their test scores go up. You know, I mean, it's great for education. So it's already happening. And in fact, if you go to globaltransformationproject.org, we have links to different programs that are already doing this in public schools. So what we're doing with the United Nations resolution, and again, everybody can go to globaltransformationproject.org and sign the petition and then spread it. What we want to do with the UN is we want to use the United Nations mechanism as an educational tool so that they put this science, this mind-body education science, in the hands of educators all over the planet. So we want to use this vehicle of the United Nations as a delivery system to make sure that educators all over the planet have this science available to them. Now, the other thing that we want is we want the teachers and the educators and the administrators in schools today to be able to point to that UN resolution and say, look, the United Nations is advocating mind-body health education and public education because of all this science. And so then all these teachers who already practice meditation or yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, or, you know, they already understand the benefits and they want to get it into their school, into their classroom or into their school or whatever, into their school district, for them to be able to point to that United Nations resolution. That would give them so much more, you know, potential of winning over their local educational facility to do this. And so in Tai Chi, we do something called push hands. And so what you do is you have a partner and you touch your wrists and then you kind of go in these circles. And what happens is you can feel when your partner tightens. And when your partner tightens, it only takes just a short little shove to send them reeling backwards. So you in Tai Chi, you attune yourself to these real subtle sensations. And when your partner tightens, then they're vulnerable. And then boom, just a little push sends them reeling. And so practicing that in Tai Chi, it kind of gets you to do that on a consciousness level. And so I think that's really contributed to how I've approached these things with World Tai Chi Day and now with Global Transformation Project. And what I've seen is what I see with the Global Transformation Project is we can use the United Nations to just give this little push to get mind-body science out to educators all over the planet. and bam, then you've got hundreds of millions of kids all over the planet that are going into alpha theta state. And what the science shows is that when a mass of people goes into alpha theta state, it has a calming, cohesive, it reduces violent crime all over the planet, all over the planet. When you just, and the studies that have been done have been when you have 1% of a population. So if you have, like Washington, D.C. did a study, and they brought in 1% of the Washington, D.C. population of the equivalent of high-level meditators in 1%, equaling 1% of the population, brought the violent crime rates down, emergency room visits, just the whole behavior of the city improved dramatically from 1%. But if but the UN resolution would get vastly more than 1% of the Earth's population to become mind-body practitioners. Hundreds of millions of new meditators would change the whole psyche of the whole planet. And so that Tai Chi thing where, when you're pushing hands, you find that little place where it just takes the least little bit of effort to have a huge impact. And so that's what the Global Transformation Project is. It's that push hand. So I've been kind of, me and the whole planet, we've been kind of pushing hands for 40 years now, creating all this mind-body science and validating that all this is true. And so now we're at a point where we can feel this vulnerability, because public education, when you look at the science, it's insane that this isn't part of public education already. What rational teacher would not want something that's going to give their students higher IQs, higher math proficiency skills, higher GRE reading scores, and higher verbal fluency scores, and better test scores, and better focus, and less bullying? There is no sane teacher in the world that would say, oh no, we don't want any of that in our school,
Or school administrator, or even at the district level, because they get more funding, right? Your test scores go up, you get more funding.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and who doesn't want more funding?
That's right. Throw some more money at us.
Hey,
We're doing good.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind throwing money at it if it was a mind-body program, because we'd see results with that,
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Well, Doug or William, do you have any other thing that you want to share with my audience before we close?
Well, I want to encourage everybody to get this new second edition of the Gospel of Science, because it'll just be a panacea for you on so many levels. It'll show you that the world's not going to hell in a handbasket. Quite the opposite. We're at the cusp of a massive time of great possibility for the planet, and the solutions are really simple. And also, it'll show you how these mind-body practices physically change the body, the brain, the nervous system, profoundly improve our immune function, and reduce depression, anxiety, mood disturbance, all these things. And so on a personal level, the book will give you all this science and some tools so that you can start, making these life changes using mind-body practices. But then at the same time as it's doing that, it's showing you the way out for the world. And it's showing you how, this fear-based media is not going to give us the answers. Science is giving us the answers, and the science is in the book. And we need to spread this and share this science. I chose the word gospel because the root word of the word gospel is good news. And so what this book shares is 40 years of collected the good news of science, the good news for the future of humanity and for all of us. And so I need your help. I need you to tell people about this. I need everybody, please just take just a couple of minutes and sign the petition at globaltransformationproject.org. And then once you sign the petition, start sharing this information with people, because it only takes a few seconds for them to sign that petition and then pass it on to other people. And what we want to do is we want to go to the United Nations with this petition with a couple of 100,000 signatures from people all over the planet. I think, and so, we've got about 1,000 so far. We just started this, but we need to, this is something that, people all over the planet would support if they looked at the science. And we have all the science at globaltransformationproject.org. So you can see the science, you can see the UN resolution, sign the petition, and then start sharing that website. Just kind of post it out there on your social media once a week. and just keep it going like that. And we can make this happen. The United Nations, in 2014, the United Nations passed a resolution proclaiming the International Day of Yoga. And and they were doing it for much the same reasons as the Global Transformation Project, to improve global health and outlook. And that resolution set a record. It had 177 sponsoring nations. 177, it set a record. And so, if they did that with the International Day of Yoga, I really don't see a problem with the Global Transformation Project's, mind-body education resolution getting passed with a record number as well. It shows that the world is ready for something like this. We're at a really unique time in history.
I honor you in your work and what you are doing. It's very noble and conscious, and this is much needed. So thank you for what you do. Keep doing the good work, and I want to thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Again, globaltransformationproject.org. Please go sign the petition and go to Amazon or Tai Chi, what was it?
SmartTaiChi.com.
SmartTaiChi.com to buy William Douglas's books. He's got a few there, but the most recent is the new second edition, The Gospel of Science, mind-blowing new science on ancient
truths to heal our stressed lives and planet.
Thank you. And I want to thank my viewers tonight and our future listeners and viewers for tuning into this wonderful interview with William Douglas. Again, thank you. And good night, everyone.